This is West Coast Training, and we're going to perform a organ pre-trip inspection. And with organ, the students are allowed to have a cheat sheet paper with them as they're going through their inspection. So I'm going to go ahead and start the inspection now. And to start it, we're going to start with the fluid levels. I'm going to start with my coolant level, and I want to check my sight glass and make sure that it's between the low and the full. It's the proper level. If I couldn't see this, I would check it when the engine is cool, and I would pull the radiator cap off and actually visually inspect it. Next, I'm going to come over to the other side, and I'm going to check my dipstick for my oil level. I'm going to make sure that that's in the proper operating range. And I'm also going to check my power steering fluid, making sure through the sight glass that my power steering fluid is at the proper level, proper operating range. I'm going to go back to the other side, and I'm going to check my belts now. I'm going to check my belts and make sure that they are snug. They have no more than a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch of deflection when pressed on. I'm also going to check that there's no cracks or frays and no loose fibers on them. I have to check it for both of my alternator and for my water pump. I'm going to go back over to the other side now. I'm going to check my air compressor. This is my air compressor. I'm going to check that it's securely mounted. I'm going to make sure that it has no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that there is no air or oil escaping. Air would be from the top, oil would be from the bottom. From there, I'm going to go back over to the other side and check my alternator. Alternator is right here. I'm going to check that my alternator is securely mounted. It has no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that my electrical lines are securely mounted. My electrical lines are not loose. I have no exposed, burned, or broken wiring on them at all. I'm also going to look underneath my engine compartment for puddles on the ground, for oil, any kind of fluids. 3 major fluids I'm looking for is oil, coolant, and fuel. I'm also going to check all of my hoses, making sure that my hoses don't have any leaks in them whatsoever. I'm going to go back over to the other side now. I'm going to check my steering box. Steering box is right here. I'm going to check that my steering box is securely mounted, has no loose or missing nuts or bolts, there's no leaks or damage to it whatsoever, and that the hoses are not cracked at all, and that there's no cracks or damage to the housing. I'm also going to check my steering linkage. This is my steering linkage. I'm going to check my links, my arms, and my rods, making sure that they're not worn, cracked, or bent at all. From there, I'm going to go into my springs. I'm going to check that my springs are not missing, they're not shifted, cracked, or broken. This is my spring mount right here, or other words, spring hanger. Right here on this side. I'm going to check that my spring hanger, it's not cracked or broken, it's not missing any bushings, my bushings are not damaged, and that I don't have any loose or missing U-bolts. From there, I'm going to go to my shock absorber. My shock absorber is secure, it's not cracked, it doesn't have any cracked brackets, it's not loose or missing, and that there's no leaks inside of it whatsoever. From there, I'm going to go to my driver's side door. Again, I'm going by exactly what the cheat sheet says on it, in the order that it says it. My door and mirror I'm going to check that my door opens and closes correctly from the outside. I'm also going to check that all of my seals are intact, both on the door and the door frame. I'm going to check that my hinges are securely mounted and they're not missing any hardware at all. I'm going to check window goes up and down correctly, and that my mirrors are securely mounted to the door. They're not missing any nuts or bolts. My mirrors are adjusted for the driver. They're not cracked. They're not broken. They don't have any illegal stickers or decals to obscure my view as a driver. Now I'm going to go to my fuel tank and cap. My fuel tank, I'm looking for here is shiny areas on the strap. That would indicate a shifting or a loose strap. I'm also going to make sure that my caps, or two caps in this truck, are both tight and that they're not leaking. Now I'm going to go to the rear of the tractor. Rear of the tractor, I have a drive shaft. My drive shaft is properly lubricated. It's not bent or broken. It's securely mounted, and I'm going to check it actually and make sure that it's secure. It can't shift at all on me. I'm also going to check to make sure that the joint inside of it is secure and that there's no damage or foreign debris inside the joint. From there, I'm going to go to my exhaust system. My exhaust system is securely mounted with no loose or missing nuts or bolts, and that there's no damage to the exhaust system. I'm also going to be looking for any holes or cracks or dents in it. If there were a hole, I would be able to tell by a soot trail or a rust trail coming out of it. From there, I'm going to go to my frame and cross members. My frame and cross members, they have no damage to it. No damage to the cross members. I'm missing no nuts or bolts, and that my frame does not have any illegal welds or cracks in it. From there, I'm going to go to my air connectors and my electrical lines. My air lines can have no leaks in them. They're not cracked, they're not chafed, they're not spliced or worn, and that they can supply air from the tractor to the trailer. My electrical lines, they have no steel braid showing, and they're not cracked or chafed in any way. They're not touching anything abrasively, they're not rubbing against anything. I'm going to go to my catwalk. My catwalk is solid. It's clear of objects and it's securely mounted to the frame. From there, I'm going to go to my fifth wheel coupling system. Underneath here, we have my mounting bolts. All of my mounting bolts, there's no loose or missing nuts or bolts. There's no rust trails coming out from behind them. And there's no shiny metal showing that there's shifting being involved. From there, I'm going to go to my platform. This is my platform. I'm going to check my platform that there's no cracks or breaks. There's no loose or missing pins or cotter keys. I have a cotter key up here. Also, from there I'm going to go to my fifth wheel skid plate, which is right here. I'm going to make sure that my fifth wheel skid plate is securely mounted. It's lubricated properly and it has all of its bolts and pins. This is my release arm. My release arm is in the engaged position. It's fully locked. My kingpin is inside. Right now, I'm going to go show you that. Okay, now we're going to go to the kingpin. Kingpin is off of the apron in between the fifth wheel skid plate. It's kind of dark back here, but I'm making sure that my kingpin is not bent or cracked, and I want to make sure that my jaws are securely locked around the shank of the kingpin. From there, we're going to go back out again. And I'm going to show you the apron on the trailer. Underneath side of the apron, I'm going to make sure that it's not bent or cracked or broken in any way, and also that there is no gap between the apron and the fifth wheel skid plate. Again, making sure that the skid plate is properly lubricated. From there, I'm going to go to the landing gear. I'm going to make sure that my landing gear is in the fully raised position. My handle is securely stowed in its apron, and that there is no damage to the landing gear or cross members at all. From there, I'm going to go to my frame and my cross members on the trailer. My frame and cross members, there's no loose or damaged nuts or bolts. There's no damage to the floor or any holes in it for cargo to fall through, and it's not missing any nuts or bolts or rivets. From there, I'm going to go to my trailer wheels. These are my rims. My rims have no cracks or illegal welds. There's no dent to the flange, and that there's no distortion or any holes in the lug bolt holes. I'm also going to check my tires. My tires on the tread depth. On the trailer tires and on the drives, it's 2/32 of an inch, and on my steers, it's 4/32 of an inch. It cannot be any less than that. I'm going to check my sidewall for any bumps, any cracks, any abrasions. There's no tire separation. I'm going to make sure it's evenly worn, and I'm going to check my valve stem and make sure that my valve stem is securely mounted and that my valve cap is tightened, securely mounted. And I'm going to check my air pressure using a tire gauge. My lug nuts. I'm going to check all my lug nuts and make sure that they're all there and they're all securely tightened. If they weren't tightened, you could tell by a sign of a shiny thread or a rust trail emanating out from behind. Also, I want to make sure that there's no cracks in the rim emanating from behind the lug bolts. This is my hub seal. My hub seal, I want to make sure that it's not leaking. I'm going to check all of my hub seals or axle seals. On my front axles, on my steers, I'm going to check those by actually pulling off the rubber grommet here in the front and visually inspecting the level of the oil. On my drives, I can't inspect it here on the seal, so I'm going to check it at the rear differential, which is that big round thing underneath. And on my trailer tandems, I actually have a sight glass that I can check the oil level with the sight glass. If I couldn't, I could actually pop off this rubber seal also. Alright, from there, I'm going to check my slack adjuster and push rods. These are my slack adjuster and push rods. My slack adjuster push rods, I'm going to make sure that they are not cracked, bent, or broken in any way. They're not missing any nuts or bolts or cotter keys. And with the engine running and the brakes applied, you can have no less than a 90-degree angle between your slack adjuster and push rod. And with the brakes applied, you can have no more than 1 inch of pull. From there, I'm going to go to my brake chambers, which is right here. I'm going to check my brake chambers. Make sure that they're securely mounted. There's no cracks or dents or holes in them. My clamps are securely mounted around the chambers and that they're operating properly. I'm going to check my hoses and my lines. My hoses and lines are not cracked or worn, and they're not leaking in any way. They can supply air to my brakes. My drums and liners. I have my brake liners on the inside and my drums. My drums, they show no wear or cracks or grooves in them, and that there's no oil or grease between the drums and the liners. And my brake liners, I have to make sure that there's not less than a 1/4 inch of brake liner on it. Again, making sure that there's no cracks or grooves in there and no grease or oil between the liners and the drums. Alrighty, let's go back to the trailer suspension. On my trailer suspension, I'm going to check my springs again. My springs are securely mounted. They're not cracked or bent or shifted in any way, and none of them are missing. I'm going to check my U-bolts, make sure they're securely mounted, and I'm going to check all of my nuts, make sure they're tight and not missing. From there, I'm going to go to my spring hangers, making sure that they're securely mounted to the frame, not cracked or bent or broken in any way, and my bushing is securely mounted and not overly worn. From there, I'm going to go to my torque arm and my torsion bar on the other side. My torque arm, torsion bar, they're not cracked or broken in any way, not twisted, securely mounted, not missing any nuts or bolts. Now we're going to go to my doors on my trailer. The door on my trailer is securely mounted. It's not missing any nuts or bolts or rivets. There's no holes for cargo to fall through. Securely mounted to the hinges. My sills are intact. All the hardware is in place. My mud flaps. Mud flaps are not torn or damaged in any way. They're securely mounted to the trailer, and that they're not more than 10 inches off the ground. From there, I'm going to go to my front lights. I'm going to check my front lights, both headlights and turn signals, marker lights, and clearance lights, making sure that they're all securely mounted. They're not cracked, bent, or broken. They operate properly. They are all the correct color, which is all amber to the front. From there, I'm going to go to my rear lights. Rear lights, both on the tractor and the trailer, are all securely mounted, operating properly, not cracked, bent, or broken in any way, and that they are all red to the rear. Now I'm going to check all of my clearance lights and my reflectors and reflective tape. All of my clearance markers are securely mounted, all working properly, not cracked or broken in any way, all the correct color, amber to the front, red to the rear. All of my reflective tape is properly spaced, properly adhered, and it is clean. I have reflectors on the truck also. Yellow everywhere except for the reflectors to the rear, which are red. And again, well, I already checked the mud flaps. I checked my mud flaps up on the tractor the same way as I did these mud flaps back here, making sure that they are properly secured to the trailer and no more than 10 inches off the ground and not overly damaged. Now we're going to go and get in the in-cab for an in-cab inspection. Okay, Now that we're back in the cab, I'm going to do a proper in-cab inspection. By doing this, I'm going to make sure that I have my safety belt on. It's always the first thing you do when you sit down inside the truck. Okay, now I'm going to start an in-cab inspection. To do this, I'm going to put my hands through the steering wheel. The first thing that I'm going to check is my instrument cluster. I'm going to check my oil indicator, that it's properly rising, and that the warning light is off, and that it functions correctly. I'm going to check my water temperature, making sure that it is rising. There's no warning light. I know that that is performing correctly. I'm going to go over to the middle here, and I'm going to hit my voltmeter and make sure that my voltmeter is actually being charged by the alternator. It's showing usually about 14 volts. From there, I'm going to go over to my air gauges, making sure that my air gauges are rising, or at least they have risen and have got to the governor cutout. From there, I'm going to go to my left turn signal, my right turn signal, my four-way flashers, and my high beams. From there, I'm going to pull my hands out of the steering wheel, and the first thing I come across would be my electric horn, and then I'm going to hit my air horn also. From there, I'm going to continue out with my hands, and the first thing I come across is my seat belt. I'm going to make sure that my seat belt is properly secured. It's mounted properly to the frame of the truck. It's adjusted properly for me as the driver, and I'm going to make sure that there's no cuts or frays or any tears inside this at all. I'm going to go to my safety equipment now. My first piece of the safety equipment is my 3 triangles behind the seat. The second piece of safety equipment is my fire extinguisher, which is securely mounted. It's properly rated and properly charged. And from there, I have spare fuses up here in my cubby. From there, I'm going to go down to my heater and defrost. I'm going to make sure that my heater works underneath and my defrost works up top. From there, I'm going to check my windshield. My windshield is properly secured to the truck. There's no cracks, there's no chips, there's no excessive dirt, and there's no illegal stickers or decals to obstruct my view. From there, I'm going to go to the windshield wiper arms outside, making sure that they're securely mounted. They're operating properly, they're not cracked, bent, or broken in any way. I'm also going to check that my wiper blades are securely mounted to the arms, and they're not cracked or frayed or broken in any way. And then I'm also going to check my wipers that they work properly, and also I'm going to check that my fluid works properly, which it does. From there, I'm going to work my way out to my mirror. My mirror is securely mounted to the truck. It's adjusted properly, both sides for me as the driver. Again, it's not cracked, bent, or broken in any way. It's got no illegal stickers or decals to obstruct my view as a driver. No excessive dirt. Now we're going to do a proper air brake check. In order to do an air brake check, I have to have the engine running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the engine on, and I'm actually going to fan the brakes down to approximately 90 psi. The air governor will turn on, and the compressor will start pumping air into the tanks. During that time, I'm going to push my service brake for 1 full minute. I cannot have any air loss in that minute. In fact, my tanks should actually be building air pressure. So I have to chalk my wheels if I'm on an incline, but I'm not on an incline, so I don't need to chalk my wheels. And the first step on this after I start the engine is I'm going to release the brakes to start my air brake check. So I'm going to go ahead and do a proper safety start. I'm going to make sure it's in neutral, pushing my clutch in, my brakes are set, and I'm going to start my engine. ABS light comes on and off. That's a proper safety start. release the clutch slowly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to release my brakes. And I'm actually going to fan the brake down until 90 psi, and then I'm going to start my minute test. And I'm going to hold the brake down firmly, and I'm going to start my test right now for 1 full minute. My air has to show that it at least stays the same, or that it's actually building pressure, which I can see right now. It is slowly building pressure. So I know that my air compressor is properly working. Again, I have to time this for 1 full minute. The tester will not time this for you. You have to time this yourself. As we're approaching 50 seconds now, I can see that I've gained about 12 psi already. My right leg is getting sore. 58, 59, and 60. I've actually gained about 15 psi, so I know that my compressor is properly working. Now, to do my low air warning systems check, I'm going to continue to fan the brakes until my low air warning system comes on, which will be a red light and a buzzer. That should come on before we reach 60 psi. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That actually came on at 72. I know that's before 60, so that system, I have a red light and a buzzer showing. It's all good. Now I'm going to go ahead and do my tractor protection valve check. This red valve should pop out. I'm going to continue to press my brake pedal. That should pop out before it gets below 20 psi. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. That was at 27 psi. They actually both popped out. So I know that that is in proper operating condition. I need to mention that I'm doing this whole systems check here. This air systems check is in a tractor and trailer combination vehicle. Now that I'm done with my air brake systems check, I can go ahead, let this build up a little bit farther, and I'm going to go ahead and do my brake checks. With my brake checks, I can refer back to my cheat sheet. I have to check my parking brake. By checking my parking brake, I'm going to go ahead and actually push in my trailer brake. I'm going to put it in gear, and I'm going to slowly pull against the parking brake and make sure that it holds. And I can tell by the sound of the engine lugging down that my parking brake is holding. Now I'm going to check my service brakes. I'm going to push in both of my brakes. I'm going to roll forward about 5 feet and check my service brakes and make sure that they actually stop the truck. Service brakes are working correctly. I can go ahead and take it out of gear, set my brakes, release my clutch slowly, and my pre-trip is now complete. And that is your Oregon pre-trip.